Hello, everybody. Today is May 15th, 2023. You're stuck with me today. Jordan has had a busy weekend with a very cute but very crying baby, from what it sounds like. So you're stuck with just me today. If you've never met me before, DeAngelis. I have been on the ground covering East Palestine predominantly so far this year. We're going to be covering a lot of new updates with what are going on there. From some of my recent reporting trip on the ground, which was my third time going there. Colin, who's behind the scenes today, joined me there on that trip. So we're going to be covering some clips from that we still have not yet released, because we did a ton of interviews with a lot of folks, some of whom you will recognize from videos on the channel already. But in addition to that, some new faces as well. Good to see some folks in the chat here. I haven't been on the live stream in a while, so good to be here. Thanks for the reminder there, Colin. For those of you just joining, please smash the like button to help get this video out to more folks. We're gonna have a very busy show today. We're gonna start off with a town hall meeting that happened in East Palestine with the EPA, mostly in regards to water sampling, but the questions and answers kind of went off into all sorts of different directions. So we're gonna have some good updates there from some actual clips from that town hall with residents asking very pointed questions to the EPA, and unfortunately the EPA continuing to just gaslight these people into thinking that, everything's fine. Oh, you don't need to worry about getting vinyl chloride tests for your urine. The EPA saying that they don't know who they is still in regards to who made the decision to do the controlled vent and burn, all sorts of stuff there. So that will be kind of the first segment. Then we're going to get into a new story that just dropped today around noon. The fire chief from East Palestine, Chief Drebeck, some text messages were released after a Freedom of Information Act request that really digs in deep into just showing how bad the communication in Unified Command was during all of this. The lack of communication directly from the governor of Ohio. The fire chief really calls out the governor of Ohio in this. We've seen a lot of this ourselves and have been calling it out. But some really bombshell text messages here that we'll go through the whole article just to kind of give my perspective on everything. And I'd be curious to hear what you all think about this in the comments as well. Yes, Colin is back. I know that everybody on the team is grateful that Colin is back from his trip. It is much more difficult to do this without him. So notice some folks saying that in the comments there. And then lastly, we're going to get into some new clips as well as a couple old clips from the last East Palestine trip that we did. Again, some of those interviews have been released already. A few of them have yet to be released, so you'll get a sneak preview at some of those. Again, this month as well, we're on a drive to get 100 new paying Status Coup members. If you're able to do so to help, StatusCoup.com/join. I believe we are at 55 right now, which is we're on track for the month, right? So we're about halfway through the month. We're a little bit over halfway of our goal. I'd love for when Jordan gets back tomorrow to host a live stream that we've got another 10, 15, maybe even 20 new members signed up from this live stream. So if you are able to, StatusCoup.com/join. We'll talk more about that later on. With that, we are going to get into some of the comments and some of the new information at this EPA Town Hall meeting that happened. Unfortunately, a lot of it was pretty standard boilerplate. We're doing everything fine. We're doing everything the way that we should. Here's an update. We want to keep the questions very focused on this one topic. But we did get a couple new pieces of information from this town hall meeting. The first question that we'll get to in just a second here comes from resident Jamie Wallace, who you've seen on the show before, both remotely as well as in several interviews that I've done on the ground with her. Jamie asked the question, who is the they that the EPA representative Mark Durno referred to in a piece that we put out about a month and a half ago covering this story, the EPA saying that they made the decision. It was very unclear who they was. Colin, we can go ahead and play that first clip from the EPA meeting.
Sort of.
Okay.
It has to do with the controlled burn in the plume. I know at one of our prior meetings, and it kind of reminded me when Linda asked you about they, you had said that the EPA had originally created a model for the controlled burn of one train car. And then you said they called on that Sunday night and said, we've changed it to 5. Can you just clarify who that they was? Was that Norfolk Southern who changed that to 5 rail cars, or was it our city government? Who is the they in that statement?
So I'll have to circle back with our on-scene coordinator who was on site that night to give you a better answer. We actually have a request from a reporter on that very question, and we're going to get back to them on that. But again, Jamie, our OSC can advise on that. Now, there was modeling done for this I do know, there was modeling done for the 5-car burn in advance of the 5-car burn, and that was coordinated through the Ohio National Guard. It wasn't coordinated through us.
Thank you for your question.
So, any more drinking water? Because we're starting to get off topic. So
This is about the drinking water again.
Okay.
My house, five houses away. When the burn happened, the original.
Alrighty, so first off, I'll say that the reporter in question there is yours truly from Status Coup, along with Jordan. We've been bugging the EPA almost on a daily basis for questions to all sorts of answers, ranging from this one to all sorts of other questions. One of them is a big one related to a story that we've been teasing for a while here. We are literally like days away from getting this out here. But again, it's another thing that the EPA seemingly can't answer when they're saying we don't have the answer for you who they is. We don't have the answer for you who they is. I need to go check in with this person. We asked that question weeks ago, 3 weeks, maybe a month ago at this point. I'd have to double check the emails. This gentleman, Mark Durno, has had weeks to go ask the on-site coordinator who they is. Weeks. Mark Durno made that statement himself about they made the decision for the controlled vent and burn back at the beginning of March, okay? At a town hall meeting that we did the story about. The fact that I need to go circle back and do this, pulling the old Jen Psaki move here, is absolutely ridiculous. This gentleman has had more than enough time to figure out the answer to this question, and it's really not even a mystery at this point, as we'll get into in a second here. Colin, we can go ahead and play EPA clip number 2 because other people in the room know who they is.
So I was going to ask a question on the drinking water, but I can answer the question on the 5-car burn that you have, because I'm one of the attorneys that's one of the 4 leads on the federal class action, and I sat through the Pennsylvania hearings in the Darlington Fire Hall with their House of Representatives, and they had all this testimony that Norfolk Southern was the ones that decided that they were going to blow the other 4 cars. That's who the they was in that, and they were all upset over it. When they questioned them, they said they've had 200 years. This is the testimony that came out in the hearing. We've had 200 years of doing this, and we know better, and that's what we're going to do. So that's why Pennsylvania's reps and all of them were upset over that. They didn't give them a reason why the other 4 cars needed to be blown.
It was cheaper than hauling it out properly. It was cheaper.
Yeah,
And
and so
yeah.
you make a great point, and what I think the primary point is to take home from this is there are going to be investigations going on for a long time over this incident.
Yes,
So,
and both states are going to push the investigations, especially Pennsylvania and Ohio, I know. And the only other thing I had with drinking water was the private wells, which this was basically a baseline testing presentation tonight, because I think you all agree that, and we had a biochemical engineer named Steve Petty go around and do testing.
Colin, we can go ahead and cut it. I gave you too long of a time here. So there you heard, again, this was a gentleman who's working on a lawyer working on the federal class action lawsuit here. I don't know his name, unfortunately. We will try to figure out exactly who that gentleman is. But he was at the same hearing that happened in Darlington, Pennsylvania that Colin and I were at on our second reporting trip to East Palestine, where we heard from dozens of Pennsylvania House of Representative members who specifically say that, from their understanding in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, that Norfolk Southern was the they in question. I confirmed this even more afterwards when I reached out and got in touch with Representative Abigail Salisbury, representative from the Pennsylvania House. You can see that interview on Status Coup. I'm actually considering reaching out to do a bit of a follow-up with her on some other stuff that we spoke about in that interview. So a good chance if you haven't seen that and you're not subscribed to us, you might be seeing us for the first time, press the subscribe button down below. It's an easy way to help support us if you can't do so financially by becoming a member. And also, we've got 125 people people watching, please smash the like button. Let's get this out to way more people. We need a lot more people watching this. If you can help us out by just pressing the like button, it goes a long way as far as helping out the algorithm. So again, Mark Durno can very easily answer this question of who the they is. For whatever reason, they're choosing not to. Really don't understand why. It's really not a surprise at this point. But it's just another thing here of the EPA continuing to not answer questions, continuing to, what we'll hear in a second, just full-on gaslight residents about things that they really know the answer to. This third clip from the EPA here is the, let's see. Sorry about this. I pulled the clips together on this a little bit. Okay, this is a question in regards to the upstream water sampling. So the water sampling plan for East Palestine has been very unclear. It'll be, some things will be done in one area, they'll move to another area. If you're within 1 mile, you'll get it. And then they changed it to where if you're within 250 feet of a stream, all sorts of different adjustments here as far as the water sampling plan. But most recently, and this was initially flagged to me, I noticed this on Twitter from Dr. Andrew Welton, Purdue University professor, PhD. This gentleman knows exactly what he's talking about. And this was a red flag that stood out to him. That the water sampling area actually is now testing some water upstream from the derailment site. Not downstream, like most of the stuff we've heard about in Sulphur Run and Leslie Run, but now also upstream. Now, some of this information, came from a town hall meeting that happened about a week and a half ago, but it took the EPA a long time to post this video publicly. So some of this might not be new to all of you, but I think that it is worth going through all of this here. Let's go ahead and play that third clip from the EPA town hall meeting.
Yeah, so the initial two zones, we're looking at surface water running this direction, so we're looking at surface and groundwater, and so that's why we were focused this direction, and then this direction.
Because I understand with that third area, they were talking about upstream somewhat was added to that area. Is that right? From the derailment?
Yeah. So north of town, this part of that is upstream. Correct.
Right. I was just curious as to why that switch happened and why that wasn't done in the beginning. So thank you.
Yeah, and all I can say is it was an analysis done by our folks to be more complete. That's the best answer I could give you.
So, again, Mark Durno not providing an answer. Again, Mark Durno, the gentleman who is speaking right there, representative of the EPA. Jordan is familiar with Mark Durno from coverage in Flint over the years. So this gentleman is somebody who's generally brought in to these disasters to kind of clean up the PR mess, it seems. But here, again, kind of not really providing any real answers, saying he'll need to get back with you on this. Really, the reason why they're probably needing to look upstream and test water upstream is because, I don't know about you all, but I've seen that drone footage, and Colin, we didn't have this ready, but if you have some of the drone footage to show this massive, massive, massive plume of smoke that went up and blew in multiple directions, I will say. It did not just blow in one direction because, unfortunately, the wind shifted several times throughout the night during this, started blowing to the southwest and then, to the southeast, and then shifted to the east, and then shifted almost due north. That massive black plume of smoke right there, filled with all sorts of chemicals and byproducts of the chemicals that were on board that train, ranging from everything from the vinyl chloride and butyl acrylate themselves to the byproducts ranging from everything from formaldehyde to hydrogen chloride to all sorts of other things, including dioxin, which I'll remind you, when I talked with Dr. Stephen Lester at one of these meetings on our first trip to East Palestine, dioxins are heavier than air, but during that massive freaking plume of smoke, they get launched up into the air. Those dioxins are heavier than the air, and then they start to settle. You can see how big that cloud is right there, and this is early on in the controlled burn, in quotes. This is very early on. Those clouds went so much further. Colin, that's all good with that. Thank you for showing that. It went so much further out than that. Okay, so then this stuff all starts to settle down and land in the soil and land on the ground and in the grass. And then it rains or the snow starts to melt and all this sort of stuff happens, and these chemicals seep down potentially into the groundwater, okay? I'm not saying that it's there right now, but the risk for this seeping into the groundwater in the future is absolutely there. Is it higher in the areas downstream? Probably, but there is a chance there for folks upstream of this where the wind blew, all of these things. So it is a red flag that this is now starting to be sampled for in areas upstream. I think it's a good thing. The sampling areas should be much wider. Anyone who feels uncomfortable should be able to have sampling done of their wells. I mean, we're talking drinking water. Of course, we should be able to go through and make sure that these residents' drinking water wells are, safe for them to drink. But again, that is an issue that is continuing to come up. But again, red flag that, whoa, now even the EPA is moving their testing area up into this section. One last big bombshell that I'd like to point out from this EPA Town Hall meeting, not bombshell, but some typical EPA gaslighting at this point, unfortunately, comes from a question regarding vinyl chloride urine testing. This question came from Chrissy Ferguson, who I interviewed myself. I've interviewed her multiple times. You've seen her on the channel. Unfortunately, she has some of the highest vinyl chloride readings that I have seen in interviewing, dozens of people in East Palestine. We spoke with the doctor who's actually been giving the prescriptions out for this. We'll play a couple of clips from that interview later, but that interview is also already posted on the channel as well. So Chrissy asks this question of Mark Durno about the vinyl chloride testing, and Durno tries to just gaslight these people into thinking that it's from taking too many vitamins and smoking cigarettes. Colin, we can go ahead and play the fourth clip from the EPA Town Hall meeting.
So the question with vinyl chloride was, the question that some of you have who have had testing done, right? Have the urine test done, and it was always strange to me, not being a health professional. Why are we seeing vinyl chloride or benzene? Shelby mentioned that she had benzene in her urine, right?
A couple people have.
Yeah, and so I'm like, how, that's just, if you have vinyl chloride or benzene in your urine, that, how are you even living?
To do with the train.
How are you even living? And it turns out it's not vinyl chloride and benzene, it's the metabolites that are actually being tested for, the thioglycol.
Thioglycolic acid.
That, yeah.
Which occurs
Yeah.
after the vinyl chloride
So-
is processed through
Yeah.
the system.
So we've been doing some more digging into that, and I think at the end of the day, I think what would be helpful to you all is to have one of these information sessions on public health, right? Right?
Yeah.
Because as I've dug into it more, I'm getting the same information that the medical community has been sharing with you.
That's not.
None.
Well, let me tell you what I know, okay, and then let me tell you how that relates to our work, because that's what we're here to report.
Well, I mean, I don't know what the medical community has been sharing with you guys, because you guys have it. But my medical community is sharing zero information with me. And that is the Ohio Department of Health, who actually brought in a toxicologist to talk to me and left me with zero answers.
Right.
Zero.
Okay.
I got zero.
So, well, hold on. Let me walk through this, and then we can have a
Mark,
discussion.
I'm not leaning on you for this because
I
you're not a
understand.
medical expert.
Right, I'm not.
I'm just asking you to call the company and see if they'll tell you something.
Well, hold that thought, because so with this metabolite, right? And I know you've heard this before, and I know you don't want to hear it again. But with this metabolite, there are several other chemicals. There are several lifestyle products that can create this chemical, right? And so as I've looked into it, I saw two things that I consume, right? I drink alcohol, and I consume vitamin B12. And those are two things.
I don't.
But we
Hold-
gotta
hold
trust
on.
your test.
Not just,
We gotta trust the EPA.
We gotta believe
hold on,
every EPA
hold on,
test
hold on, hold on.
is gold,
Let
and
me-
ours gets debunked.
right, let me go through this, all right? So we know that is not a preferred test for this type of exposure unless it's an acute exposure, all right? And the only potential time there may have been an acute exposure would have been the night of the derailment, okay? And 3 to 6 hours, once that derailment happened, the air monitoring teams got on site. And we have an impressive amount of monitoring and sampling data that shows that at least after the first several hours, we didn't see a large acute amount of vinyl chloride getting into the neighborhoods. Now, it doesn't mean that you weren't exposed. We wouldn't try to kid you on something like that.
Did you have some
We
leakage?
know, we know that there were releases. There were absolutely releases, right? And we know that the monitoring network that was set up at the time was not nearly as impressive as it is now. We know that. So was there a potential for exposure? Certainly. Anybody that lived down close to that or was downwind of that could have potentially been exposed to not only vinyl chloride, but some of the other contaminants that were involved in a train derailment. Absolutely.
Will you
Right.
get checked by my doctor for your
So-
urine with it?
So,
Would you do that if you can't call the
so
manufacturer?
hold on. So, so again, you have to understand the limitations of the test, right? We have to also understand that it requires an acute exposure. There, the impressive monitoring sampling network that we have on site now does not show, not only does it not show an acute exposure, it doesn't even show an intermediate level exposure. The levels that we're coming back when we do get a vinyl chloride detection are down below a part per billion, all right?
Is it storm drains you mentioned?
All right, so, well, hold on, again, let me finish, and then we can talk about this. And then, so finally, again, I think it would be valuable, on this issue to, have a public health information session. So we'll look into doing that, seeing when we can do it. I know that, remember the assessment of chemical exposure survey that was done by TSDR way back in February, March. I think they're getting close to releasing their report. So, that could tie in nicely, with this type of discussion. So again, I just, want to make you understand that there are reasons that A, that test isn't recommended, and B, that we don't have.
I have the ATSDR document regarding
hold on.
vinyl chloride testing. I can read it word for word for you if you
And,
would like.
right, well, hold on, and we don't see any evidence of acute exposure, and I think that's really important, okay? So, so along those lines, next steps, see if we can have a discussion, on this topic, right?
Is that a no then,
Mark?
to me, you're not gonna
I
contact?
think we only got time for like 2 more questions.
Okay, and so, no,
Informed
no,
answer it.
no, she asked for an answer, and I don't see a reason why we would do that, okay? And that's,
Because Christy tested positive, because Jake tested positive, or get someone Linda, or get someone from the
Yeah.
CDC down here.
I-
And when you're saying that contaminated soil is actively exposing us to gases, those aren't from vinyl chloride at all?
not at those levels, not at acute levels, and that's what's important. Any vapors that are being generated
What's
from that
considered
site.
a acute level?
Uh, initially, in the emergency phase, over 500 parts per billion. After about a week, we dropped that to 50 parts per billion. Now it's down to 20 parts per billion. The levels that we're seeing are off-site are below 1 part per billion.
But do the continued exposure, do you account for that? And do you account for that exposure being mixed with other chemicals?
Right.
Because I know you're saying like some common products can, cause these things in your urine, but I know my brother, talked to some doctors who said, for cigarettes to make the amount of vinyl chloride show up in his urine that showed up,
Yeah.
he had to smoke 20 packs a day.
So,
Or drink 36 gallons.
yeah, no, I get it, I get it, and that's, Jamie, that's why.
You said it's up in the air and it goes away. How about our storm drains? Has anybody checked them?
So,
We're figuring out somewhere along the line we're being exposed.
yeah, I'll take that back. I'll take that back, Thomas. But again, what's important here is we're not seeing. We have the site. We know it's contaminated still, right? It's the speed of the cleanup has really picked up. Just about all the.
Make sure they're not slacking, and that's why they're speeding.
Yeah.
They haven't done the burn pit yet, right? They haven't cleaned.
We haven't touched the pit yet. You're
So the
right.
best is yet to come.
You're right.
So then when we get vinyl chloride,
So-
it'll be because we're all smoking a carton a day, right?
So and so you have contamination over here.
And having campfires and
You have-
barbecues.
Yeah, you have individuals over here. We're not completing that exposure pathway. And again, so I think it would be valuable for you all to to have that open conversation about public health. So.
Whoo! Wow. Listening to him try to get his way out of all of that. I had a couple questions in the chat that I wanted to answer. His name is Mark Durno. He's a representative from the EPA, the US EPA. He was trying so hard to tell these people that he had all the answers, that the tests that they were doing were wrong. The residents in the audience there clearly aren't buying the BS. Several of those residents we've spoken with on camera in interviews, some yet to be posted still. But again, that was Chrissy Ferguson who asked the initial question there. Jamie had lots of follow-up questions. I heard Eric at one point in there. There's several people continuing to push on this gentleman for... I mean, at first he's like, oh, there's several lifestyle products that could cause your vinyl chloride levels to be elevated, namely vitamin B12 and alcohol. I forget the specific statistic, but Eric Kaza from East Palestine he threw it out there in there saying you'd need to be drinking like gallons and gallons of alcohol. You'd need to be drinking cartons and cartons and cartons, or sorry, smoking cartons and cartons and cartons of cigarettes every day to even have it pop up as a level there. Mark Durno is trying to tell people, oh, that test isn't good, it's not accurate for this. And one of the residents, I want to read the direct quote, she said, every EPA test is golden, but ours is debunked, which is hilarious because a lot of the EPA tests are not golden. I uncovered some of that in reporting for Status Coup when at one of these other town hall meetings, Mark Durno admitted that the air testing devices being used won't pick up levels of butyl acrylate until it is 5 times the action level. And then I went further after interviewing several chemists, toxicologists on and off the record on this topic, who told me that tests for formaldehyde should have been done in people's homes, and formaldehyde would not pop up on these same devices that were being used by the EPA unless it had a special attachment on the device. But if that attachment is on the device, you cannot do the tests for everything else that they were testing for in the home, meaning formaldehyde was not tested for, even though it is a byproduct of vinyl chloride after combustion. Phosgene, the devices that they're using. Again, phosgene is a product of combusted vinyl chloride. You're not going to find it ever with the device being used. So the EPA, and the point that I don't know who said that in the crowd, but the EPA, all of their tests are essentially, she said, are golden. But one test that the residents bring up, it's debunked because, everyone is taking too much B12, drinking gallons of alcohol every day, and smoking like 6 packs of cigarettes per day each. Unfortunately, I know that a lot of those things are already debunked again anyway, because I spoke with the doctor who actually was giving the prescriptions for these vinyl chloride tests, because unfortunately a lot of regular, folks' doctors, their normal doctors, weren't doing the prescriptions. So luckily a chiropractor in town, Dr. Chai, we're going to play a couple clips from my interview with him later, was writing these prescriptions for folks to get the vinyl chloride tests done. And unfortunately an 18-year-old athlete who goes to school in East Palestine, he's not even sleeping in East Palestine, according to Dr. Chai, as well as another resident, Chrissy, who told us about him. Not even sleeping in East Palestine anymore. He's just going to school there. He goes to the high school, so he spends time in town. This high school athlete tested positive for vinyl chloride metabolite in his urine. I want to be clear, it's not vinyl chloride actually in the urine. It's the metabolite created by vinyl chloride. So when your body, is exposed to vinyl chloride, it creates metabolite. And that is what is found in your urine. That metabolite can only be created in a handful of ways. A chemist that I've spoken with on this says each more person who tests positive for vinyl chloride in their urine, and the number is growing and growing, you would have to twist yourself into a scientific pretzel to make the argument that it is not from this derailment, okay? More and more and more people are getting these tests done. The Dr. Chai, who I spoke with, has said that he has had residents test both positive and negative for the vinyl chloride metabolite in their urine, and that includes folks who are smokers and non-smokers on both the positive and negative test results. Now, to me, that's a very good sign that the test is actually appropriate here, because some people are not spending time in town anymore, or they're further away. But the folks who unfortunately are working right in town near the derailment site, who live right in town near the derailment site, one of those being Shelby Walker, who we did a live stream with while I was in East Palestine last, she unfortunately tested positive, probably because she lives right there. Okay, it is not because she has a fire pit in her backyard, which is an actual excuse that people tried to say that she tested positive for benzene in her urine because there was a fire pit in her backyard. Wild shit, to be frank with you, wild shit. But that is what the EPA is telling people. They are absolutely trying to gaslight these people. Fortunately, residents of East Palestine, I'm seeing some of their names in the comments, so thank you all for watching. They're not buying it. Because they know better. They've unfortunately had to become experts in all of these topics to just be able to stand their own ground and hope that some sort of justice can be brought to them, some sort of semblance of normalcy can return to their lives, whether that be in East Palestine or elsewhere. Wild. We've got almost 250 people watching. If you can please smash the like button, that would help get this out to more folks. We'd really appreciate it. I've seen we've gotten a couple super chats throughout this so far. I'll read those at the end. Thank you so much for doing that throughout. There was one comment I flagged here from Stella, who will be playing a little bit of her interview in a bit, and we'll post her full interview probably this week at some point. Mark Durno, in that response, mentioned the CDC, or somebody was asking for the CDC to come. Stella pointed out rightfully, the CDC was there. They got sick, left, and never came back. That was reporting from CNN. CDC members went to East Palestine. They were not doing studying at the derailment site itself, but they were going door to door in town. Multiple members of the CDC team got sick, left, and when they left, they felt better. Again, no one in East Palestine wants to see anybody get sick here. But the fact that even the CDC had not one, not two, it was 5 or 6 members of their small team got sick while doing some studies in East Palestine on residents' health, and they left and have not come back, to my knowledge, and it seems like to Stella's knowledge as well, who is an East Palestine resident who we've spoken with a handful of times on the show already. So, again, wild stuff here. We're going to move on now to a story that just broke today. Colin, if you want to go ahead and pull up this article. This is Fire Chief Drabeck. He is the East Palestine Fire Chief. Some text messages were revealed. We're going to go ahead and read this here. So the headline is, texts reveal East Palestine Fire Chief's frustration over lack of advice from health officials. We can scroll down a bit, Colin. So the desperate fire chief of East Palestine, Ohio, said he felt defeated, useless, and so angry in the wake of the train derailment. Texts and emails obtained by DailyMail.com reveal Keith Drabeck vented his frustration privately in messages following the February 3rd crash, which saw a toxic soup of carcinogenic and corrosive chemicals released into the community, resulting in an environmental and health crisis. Text message exchanges show Drabeck becoming increasingly aggravated, at one point expressing, quote, "Why does this have to be so hard?" He admitted to having to take a moment because he was getting, quote, overwhelmed with the conflicting responses to disaster by officials, particularly a leaflet campaigned by the Federal Emergency Management Agency that he dubbed, quote, a ginormous shit show. He also said that he felt abandoned by Ohio's Republican governor, Mike DeWine, after he was left to, quote, sit by and watch shit fall apart, and admitted that he had, quote, lost faith in the city's health department after it told him to treat the crash like a normal house fire. Emails and text messages obtained by DailyMail.com reveal East Palestine Fire Chief Keith Drabeck's frustrations over officials' poor handling of the February 3rd train wreck that sparked an environmental and health crisis in the community. Drabeck became disgruntled with Ohio Governor Mike DeWine's apparent lack of communications with local officials after he failed to inform the fire chief about a press conference on the derailment. The site of the disastrous Norfolk Southern derailment pictured above became ground zero where a mixture of 6 highly toxic chemicals leached into the soil and water. The messages released as part of a FOIA request paint a vivid picture of how first responders handled the derailment of 38 carriages of the Norfolk Southern train as it made its way through the city. 11 of them were carrying hazardous chemicals like vinyl chloride, and half of the 5,000 residents were evacuated as Norfolk Southern conducted a controlled burn. But according to a lawsuit filed by residents, this ended up releasing a chemical that had been banned after World War I and left them with headaches, coughing, and burning feelings on their skin. Dozens of fish were killed. It's actually many more than dozens. And residents fled the area amid fears their drinking water had become contaminated. The accident led to congressional hearings, calls for tighter freight safety laws, and an ongoing investigation into the crash by the National Transportation Safety Board, which is also investigating Norfolk Southern safety practices. The messages show the frustrations of local officials who are overwhelmed by emails from cranks who sent conspiracy theories, well-wishers sending donations, and requests for media interviews. As the weeks went by, federal agencies like the EPA flooded officials' inboxes with contact sheets for their departments and demands for meetings. Drabeck had only been East Palestine's fire chief for a year when the crash occurred, though he has worked as a firefighter for decades. The messages portray him as a straight talker who cares deeply about his community and was grappling with unimaginable conditions. On February 7th, 4 days after the accident, Drabek addressed requests by residents to be allowed into the 1 mile evacuation zone that had been set up around the burn site to feed their pets. He wrote, quote, "With unknown level of contaminants, I with a heavy heart made the decision not to allow any residents to enter or be escorted into the evacuation area to gain access to the pets they left behind." On February 7th, 4 days after the accident, actually, Colin, scroll down. This is now like quoting some of the things. My apologies, folks. I should have had this also open in another tab. Bear with me. We're almost through it here, but I think this article is very important to talk about. I'm going to continue reading a little bit more, and then we'll kind of get into some analysis of it. The fire chief became increasingly frustrated with the poor communication among local and state officials. On February 14th, Drabek said he, quote, "wasn't aware of a press conference by Governor DeWine that was taking place later that day." Very nice of the governor to not tell the fire chief in charge at that point. Drabek said he was contacted by an animal rescue organization, Angels for Animals, but decided to stand firm on the decision. 2 days later, Rick Gorby, a volunteer firefighter in East Palestine, apologized to Drabek for leaving a meeting early as he had, quote, "a lot on his mind." Drabek replied, "Please don't ever apologize for that, my friend. I went back down a little bit after the news report and had to leave myself because I was starting to get overwhelmed. We all need a break." When Gorby said he saw people on TV picketing the sheriff's office, Drabek replied, "It's only going to get worse." On February 14th, Drabek said he wasn't aware of a press conference taking place later that day. All right, I'm just going to, I feel like, okay, there's one last section here I want to get to. 2 weeks later, Drabek and East Palestine Mayor Trent Conaway expressed their shock at who was speaking for their city in Congress during the testimony of Norfolk Southern Chief Executive Alan Shaw. Conaway sent a link to a Facebook post which talked about Jamie Kaza and her partner Chris Wallace, both residents of East Palestine, going to Washington. Drabek wrote, quote, "That's what the village gets to represent us in D.C. Isn't that just wonderful?" I've got thoughts on this, so we'll get back to this. Conaway replied, "What the fuck? That's the mayor." Residents had grown separated and frustrated with the lack of... Yeah, we're going to... Colin, we can finish... you can get rid of the article. I want to address that last bit there first, because... And obviously, this is in a private text message. These folks very well may have already discussed this. But if you're the mayor of the town, and you're the fire chief, and you're upset that other residents who maybe you don't like that much are the ones who, quote, get to go to D.C., I'm sorry, you're the mayor. You're the fire chief. More so on the mayor here. But if you're the mayor, just, it's not like Jamie and her partner, like, won some sort of thing, like, oh, you guys get to go to D.C. No. Like, if you're the mayor, go to D.C. yourself and do some advocating to get some actual freaking help to your residents. If you're mad about who gets to go, you go yourself and go do it. Go make a point to go fight on behalf of your residents who are being absolutely left in the dust instead of criticizing the ones who are working their butts off, who aren't elected officials, trying to get some answers. I thought that was incredibly frustrating. Colin, if you don't mind posting a link to this article in the comments, I just saw a couple people looking for it. This was just posted today. It is in the Daily Mail. Just came out. That was a really frustrating bit to that for me. It's like, I'm sorry, you don't like the residents who, quote, got to go? No, they went to go try to fight on behalf of the town that you are supposed to be running. City officials, where were you? Why weren't you going to D.C.? Your the federal representatives would more likely pick up your call than random residents who are needing to go do this on their own. So that frustrated me seeing that. There was a couple other points in here that I want to read out here that aren't that surprising to me. We've got one of the quotes here. He said he felt abandoned by the Ohio governor, Mike DeWine, after he was left to sit by and watch shit fall apart. Seems like the Ohio governor did a real good job if the fire chief is feeling like that privately. And again, these are private text messages that somehow were released as part of a Freedom of Information Act. I'm going to look into see if we can get more of these in some way. I mean, that's some strong words. And I mean, from the very beginning of this, we've known that the governor has done a pretty terrible job here, in regards to a lot of this stuff. Even in our first trip there, the man lied directly to my face about something that was very easy to have video of him saying exactly the opposite. So now to hear this, I'm very curious to hear what the governor is going to say about this. I'm sure he has not released a statement yet because this was 4 hours ago. So, the chief feeling abandoned by the Ohio governor. And I want to be clear here, like, super difficult position for the fire chief to be in, right? Like, no one wants to be in this position. Major stuff happened here. Things way above, unfortunately, the pay grade of a small town mayor, small town fire chief. But, and especially for the mayor here, to like reply with the what the fuck about, who's coming, who's going to DC on our behalf. I'm sorry, go yourself. You are very capable. You had the time to go sit there and do your press conference with President Trump, which is fine. And, anyone in that position would have. But how about the next day you go to DC and advocate on your people's behalf? I haven't seen him go try to do that. Maybe he is behind closed doors. I don't know. But after you get a meeting with Trump, you would imagine like, hey, he could probably reach out to somebody, to J.D. Vance, to get him to go show him around. I'm sure that he actually would go take him, go walk around, go door to door. J.D. Vance and Sherrod Brown are trying to pass some legislation here. Has the mayor tried to do that? I haven't seen it. Instead, complaining about the residents that are taking time out of their day to go to DC and advocate on the behalf of their neighbors. Ridiculous. The other thing I want to put in here, again, it's a similar vein here. Another quote, also, admittedly had lost faith in the county health department after it told him to treat the crash like a normal house fire? What? The fire chief was told to treat it like a normal house fire as far as like health concerns go with his firefighters. I don't know if we got to that point in the article, but later in the article, the fire chief was trying to get answers about his sick firefighters, essentially, many of them volunteer firefighters, who, the answer from the county health department is treat it like a normal house fire. This is nothing like a normal house fire. Those guys and gals who went out there the night of were exposed to horrific chemicals, some of which we know about, many we maybe don't know about, and risk their lives. These folks are going to start getting all sorts of health issues, and many of them already are having health issues, which is terrible. But treat it like a normal house fire? These were carcinogens set on fire. Many of them were at risk of exploding. But treat it like a normal house fire? Like, again, I'm conflicted here. I feel for the fire chief in some regard, and this is one of them I feel for him. He is not a health expert. You would think that the health experts would be like, no, this is not like a house fire. Absolutely ridiculous. We're going to continue to dig a little bit more into this story. I noticed this just before we kind of went live here, but I wanted to bring it to you just because, there's some major bombshells kind of throughout this in regards to actual communication between the fire chief and the mayor as it's happening, talking directly about the being abandoned by Governor DeWine. I'm going to read this quote one more time. He said he felt abandoned by Ohio Governor Mike DeWine after he was left to sit by and watch shit fall apart. I don't know what the heck DeWine is going to say about this. I really don't know what DeWine is going to be able to say about this, except look even worse in this situation that is already terrible for him. All right, if you're watching right now, we got 250 people. There's one last section here that I want to get into, which is going to be covering a lot more clips from the previous trip to East Palestine. Again, I have been there on the ground 3 times now at this point. We're hoping to get back again to continue to tell the stories of folks who live there, to tell the stories of folks who are, fighting every day trying to get this message out to folks. Actually tomorrow, there's going to be an event tomorrow night happening in East Palestine, a community press conference put on by the Unity Council. Resident Jamie Kaza, now Jamie Wallace, actually, since she's been recently married. Congratulations again, Jamie. Is actually putting on the event, continuing to actually fight on behalf of residents, even though it seems like the mayor doesn't want her to be doing that. I don't know. But continuing to fight on behalf of residents of the town of East Palestine. So her and several others who are members of the Unity Council are putting on an event that we're going to keep an eye on tomorrow. Hopefully Wednesday, we'll be able to bring you some coverage from that. So that's something new. But if you're able to support us continuing to stay on this story, both from afar like I am right now, but also continuing to actually go on the ground to actually establish the relationships with many of these residents so that I can actually have some of the context when even another news outlet breaks the story on this. I know Jamie. I know Jamie is not just some other resident in East Palestine who doesn't, can't advocate on behalf of folks there. She can and has advocated well for folks of East Palestine in DC, and I'm sure she will elsewhere. So if you're able to help support that sort of thing, statuscoup.com/join. Again, we're at like 55 or so new members this month. If you're able to help us we have a goal of getting to 100 by the end of the month, literally as low as $5 a month. It's the only way to make sure that I can continue to get to some of these places, that Jordan can continue to get back to Flint and Kalamazoo. Tomorrow, Jordan's going to be talking about some breaking news from Kalamazoo that he's been talking about. He's got an interview with a resident there. If you're able to help us out, statuscoup.com/join is the best way to do so. We would really appreciate that. With that, we're going to get into some clips from the last trip. Let's start off with... We're going to start off actually with the doctor that I mentioned, who is actually the gentleman writing the prescriptions for the vinyl chloride test that Mark Durno of the EPA, if you were watching earlier on, really doesn't want these folks to be getting for some reason. I don't know. Colin, let's go ahead. This one's a couple minutes long, but it's worth watching. We're going to play a couple clips from this interview with Dr. Chai. The full interview is posted on YouTube. I'd encourage you to check it out after this if you're interested. So we can go ahead and play the first clip with Dr. Chai, Colin.
When I first started doing it, I got some people that were negative, and I said, oh, this may be good, or it may be like the CDC is telling us that you only have a very short window anyway, and the window's gone. The chemical bomb is gone. Mm-hmm. So as I went on, I heard people being turned away from other doctors and maybe getting a wrong CPT code to go, and they were turned away from the lab. So just to make sure, I called Quest Laboratories and Quest Diagnostics. This was after I already started writing scripts, and I asked for one of their head doctors to call me back. And this is an interesting phone call because I was talking to him and I said, I just want to reaffirm that I have all the proper codes. And he said, yes, you do. And I said, it's probably a crapshoot anyway because, from what they're telling us, the bomb is gone and everybody's going to be negative anyway, even if they did incur some type of damage from the chemicals. And he said, well, that's true for the blood test. He said, that's not true for the urine test. He said the urine test shows up through chronic exposure. Let's say if it's in your home, if it's in your ducts, if it's in your environment, that's going to build up, and if you're coming in contact with it all the time, you're going to urinate or pee it out. Mm-hmm. And that changed the whole ball game for me because I stopped even testing for blood, and then I just started exclusively doing the urine test for vinyl chloride. Mm-hmm. And since then, I have had. There's been, for the few people that have tested, the ratio is quite high of people testing positive. And what I think is ridiculous, so I think we both talked to Shelby Walker.
Yep.
Oh my God, what an insult. So they go in her backyard, which was full of toxins, and the chemical bomb went just 900 feet from her home.
Right,
and
the track's literally in her backyard.
Yeah. Oh, fire pit, which you haven't used since the summer. You sit around and do a little fire. Mm-hmm. That's probably why you have benzene in your blood. And so I want to make it known that I have smokers and non-smokers both testing negative, all right? And then I have smokers and non-smokers both testing positive for vinyl chloride. So the money we spend on total waste in this government, we should be tested. Those that want tested, the government, or put it on Norfolk Southern, make them pay. Yep. We should be tested every 3 months for this until they deem it, a safe period of time when nobody's testing positive anymore.
Right. I think that's important to note too. You mentioned you've got folks who are smokers and non-smokers testing both positive and negative for this, meaning there are folks, depending on, maybe it's where you live in town, maybe it's where you work in town, maybe it's the proximity to your home to some of these creeks or to the derailment site. And that's something, they're testing positive and negative. That is getting to the point, the more and more folks that we're going to see start to take these tests, the more and more definitive this will start to look. I've also spoken with an expert who's provided me with a lot of consulting on covering all of this story. He's a PhD chemist. He's got a degree in toxicology. And he's saying the same things. He's saying, the test, he's like, it's not a perfect test. However, the more people that we're seeing, and I've been sending him a lot of these results from folks who are sharing them with me, he was saying every additional one you send me, you're going to have to twist yourself into a scientific pretzel to say that this is not from the derailment. Mm-hmm. The more people that are testing, the more clear it is that it is from the results of this. It's not from something else. You'd have to smoke 1 million cigarettes essentially to make to make this test, in that direction. So it's again important to know that it's folks who smoke and don't smoke who have tested positive for this.
I've got a young high school athlete who tested positive for vinyl chloride. It makes me want to tear up, but all right. So yeah, it's what is the downside of pricking somebody's arm and paying,
or a urine test, right?
Yeah,
right.
Or a urine test. What's the downside of that?
And just to go on the human emotion side of this whole thing, there are people in town that feel their lives are threatened. Now that they're testing positive for vinyl chloride, it's like amplifies that. And they want to get out, and they want to move. And a lot of people don't have the means to do that.
Right.
We're actively considering moving away from here. It's just something that you don't want to do when you're getting very close to retirement age. But, we have our retirement savings that we can use. Don't want to. But these people in town that don't have that, they should be given that opportunity to move out if they can.
Yeah, so I mean, you're hearing it now there directly from the actual doctor writing the prescriptions here for this vinyl chloride metabolite test. I'm going to play another clip. This is a couple minutes long as well, but Dr. Chai has also been doing a lot of actual investigating into the contamination in the creeks, and hearing him discuss some of the symptoms that he is getting from his investigations into the creeks right now is shocking, scary. Colin, we can go ahead and play clip 4 from Dr. Chai. You've done quite a bit of digging around in the creeks and seeing. We've got some of your YouTube videos. Maybe we'll provide a link for folks if they want to check that out as well. If you want to give us a little bit of an update on the creeks, what you've been up to down there for folks who haven't seen some of your videos. I
think there's a few important stories here. Number one has to do with the different factions in town. Unfortunately, what has happened. Initially, I think you said maybe a week or so, they started calling. I don't even know where they heard of us, but the national news was calling us and doing interviews. And at that time, Tammy had like a raspy irritation in the throat. And Greg Kelly on Newsmax said, "Hey, well, how do you feel, Rick?" And I said, "Well, I feel the same as after the accident. I don't really feel anything." And a day or two later, I said, "Hey, they're saying everything looks good. Let me go check this out." So if you go the back way down my house and it heads right down into Negley, I'm there in less than probably 3 minutes or so. And the creek is right there, Leslie Run. And this is the only time I'll swear on this because I'm going to give you the real reaction. So I went in there with my boots and my gloves, had no respirator on at the time. Let me talk about that for just a second. I lost my smell. I always had a keen sense of smell, very keen. Lost that to another man-made disaster, but with COVID. When I started overturning rocks and just walking in the creek, my reaction was, we are fucked. You saw the chemicals.
Yeah.
So since then, I was in there once or twice a week filming. Now, the first important thing is you can hear me in the initial video like a fool. I'm turning over the rocks and go, I wonder if I can smell this. I'm going, you can hear me sniffing. That first night, I woke up at 5 a.m. I was having a nightmare. And the reason I was having a nightmare, my joints hurt so bad. My every joint in my body. And I don't hurt. I don't feel my body. Patients come in, I have back pain. I said, I don't feel my body. I was in severe pain, had to run to the bathroom. I had 5 straight weeks of just explosive diarrhea, 10 times a day probably. I had to leave treating patients, go to the bathroom. I never had a proper bowel movement in 5 weeks. That night, I felt like strep throat times 3. My nasal cavity, if you think, all I can think of like a stripe down a skunk. I had a stripe right down the middle of my throat that burned, that went into my nasal cavity. I also came up with, I've never had acid reflux. Now, I know people talk about heartburn and when they eat, they get it. For 4 straight days, 24 hours a day, I had almost like you would call like a mist spray bottle of acids shooting into my throat. It burnt my tongue. It burnt the whole inside of my mouth. And anybody that knows me is I don't touch any medication, no drugs of any kind. I had my staff run out because I couldn't take it anymore at work. In fact, in some of the interviews, you can hear me on the national news. I'm trying to clear my throat, and so they had to get me Pepsid and Tums, and I lived on that for a bit. And then it kind of subsided. I said I got to stay out of the creeks. Mm-hmm. So so this was a day where I then, not shortly after, there was an event at the winery, which is unfortunately now closed. Mm-hmm. Well, and then there was also a
hee-haw event.
Yeah, a hee-haw event at
the Eagles.
So I said I'd go film. Interestingly enough, that night the wind was blowing so hard, and it's right down by the tracks. Mm-hmm. So that's me filming in the creeks, continuing like a fool to film in the creeks without a respirator initially, going to those events. And so I'm taking a shower, and I'm rinsing. I'm like, what is that? And my wife sent you pictures.
Yeah.
And we'll show them to folks if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's why I sent them. In my 59 years, I have never had anything wrong with my skin, nothing. There was a welt the size of, you'd say like a teacup saucer. And I said, wow, I mean, this is way too early for any kind of cancer or anything like that. I said, this is probably like a histamine reaction to chemicals. So you'll see the welt. And
the tentacle.
It almost has like tendrils coming off of it. And you can see I was not struck, I was not hit, I was not this was some type of chemical reaction along with the other things that I was suffering from.
So you hear it directly there from Dr. Rick Chai, who has been number one giving the vinyl chloride test metabolite prescriptions for folks to be able to actually get these tests that, as we heard earlier, representative from the EPA, Mark Durno, doesn't seem to want people to have it. The CDC doesn't seem to want people to have it. I don't know. Obviously, Rick, I hope, isn't playing in the creeks too much anymore, looking around for some of this stuff. But again, the EPA has essentially at different times said that this water is fine. It is not fine, clearly, still. As you can see in some of the videos there, I sent in the comments there a link to Rick's YouTube channel to see some of the stuff that he's gone and done in the creeks. There's one other thing I want to point out about Rick and Tammy Chai. They have actually put together a GoFundMe to help get residents out of East Palestine who want to leave, but not just by giving like a couple dollars. They literally wanted to do $10,000 at a time, so that folks could actually get out, afford security deposit payment, first month's rent, all that sort of stuff, because unfortunately a lot of folks in East Palestine do not have the funds to just pick up and leave. So I do want to plug the GoFundMe that they have here in just a second. They actually were able to give $10,000 to the first person from East Palestine just a couple of days ago. Colin, we can go ahead and play clip 3 from Dr. Chai and his wife, and they'll actually explain exactly what they're doing with their GoFundMe there, and then we'll get to a couple more clips from different folks in East Palestine.
So my husband and I started a fundraiser. It's 3 months after the derailment. It's not a sexy topic anymore because, the press is gone except for good folks like yourself. So we've started a Give, Send, Go, and we've also started a GoFundMe at East Palestine Off the Rails, and we want to provide that opportunity to give money to people that want a large chunk of money. Mm-hmm. I believe we're doing, if we can, $10,000 a family to move them out, or they can choose to move to a new home, or they can find a new apartment,
right.
and just
help them at least get started.
First, last,
yeah.
and security deposit,
Mm-hmm.
all of that, and some furniture, things like that. Mm-hmm. So if anyone that wants to help folks in town, please visit our GoFundMe at East Palestine Off the Rails, or if you're not comfortable with GoFundMe, Give, Send, Go at East Palestine Off the Rails. We would greatly appreciate it because we really, really want to help the people here.
And I'll make sure that we provide links to that for folks in the description too, so that folks can access it easily.
Yes,
right
the town. I mean, we've been treated very well in town, and with our business and the community. So we want to be able to give back what we can.
Mm-hmm. And I'll say too, I've spoken with, I don't even know how many people at this point over my past couple trips, but Folks in town speak very highly of both of you, and for folks watching, I know that money will go to good use. I wanted to put that in there. It's tricky with some of these. There's a lot of places to potentially donate to that are, some are on the up and up, some are not. Having met Rick and Tammy, having heard from dozens of folks in town, I'm comfortable vouching that money will be spent appropriately. $10,000 has already been given to someone in East Palestine who is now going to be able to leave. With that too, you heard Tammy say it right there. Unfortunately, a lot of the media has just picked up and gone and moved on from the story. And in a second, I'm going to get through and go through a couple more clips with you all. But if you want us to be able to continue to go on the ground, talk to folks like Rick and Tammy, as well as the dozens of people who've been able to get vinyl chloride tests as a result of them being there doing this, if you want us to go and continue to talk with Jamie and Stella and Darren and Moo and all of these other folks, we had a couple new folks this time, Jordan, who we posted the interview from, who has been dealing with all sorts of different symptoms. This water from Sulphur Creek floods into her basement, and Norfolk Southern will not pay for her to relocate. They won't do it. She's tried, they won't do it. If you want us to continue being able to tell these stories, break some of these news stories, the only way we're going to be able to do it is by membership to Status Coup. It's how we operate. We don't have corporate backers. We don't have advertisers. We basically survive exclusively off of, people power. StatusCoup.com/join. Literally as low as $5 to $10 a month. We're talking one beer at the bar. We're talking a shitty cup of Starbucks at some point. It might not sound like much, but when you get hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people to give us $5 a month, it goes a long way. So think about some of the other BS you probably spend $5 a month on. I know I spend it on BS all the time. If you're able to set that side of money to just help continue to tell these stories in East Palestine, continue to tell the stories in Kalamazoo, continue to tell the stories in Flint, and so many other places, that is how we are able to do it. We've got a goal to get 100 new members by the end of the month. We're currently, I don't know if we've gained any since the stream started, but we were at 55 just before. So we are basically right on track. But if we could get there even before, that would be great. If we're able to get quite a few today so that when Jordan comes back tomorrow, he's been lack of sleep and whatnot with the young baby this week. He's also been working on a dozen stories. He's been working on a couple of stories right now. One in regards here to East Palestine, working on stories in Kalamazoo, Flint, all of this sort of stuff. It'd be great to have him be able to come in tomorrow and see a handful of new members signed up from the stream today. With that, let's continue on and play a couple more clips here. Let's get into a clip. I see Stella in the comments. We haven't posted Stella's interview in full yet, but we will be soon. Colin, let's go ahead and play clip number 1 from Stella. It's ridiculous.
What about my grandkids and what they're going to have to deal with?
Oh, yeah.
10 years from now, I'll probably be dead, but, they're going to be 24 years old. They're going to be, they're going to be 18 years old 10 years from now. They're going to be 13 years old. Mm-hmm. And, this is going to affect them. And I tell people all the time, the fact that Norfolk Southern, that our governor had Norfolk Southern set up a fund for future illness. Now, again, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out what that means. Mm-hmm. That means that it's for future illness, so therefore, there's going to be...
Right.
I'm like, I tell people that, when they tell me, oh, you're making this up.
And why don't we go ahead and just play clip 2 from Stella as well?
If you don't look and you don't see, then you can go ahead and believe what you want to believe. And I think that's a lot of what it is. People want to believe everything's fine. And now East Palestine has all this money, and we're going to put up some pretty little red curtains downtown, and we're going to plant some flowers and build this community center or whatever. Yeah. And it's going to be this perfect little Stepford town.
Right. But to your point, the scary thing with all of this is, health symptoms right now are scary, yes. But vinyl chloride is a carcinogen. The byproducts of vinyl chloride, like these things cause cancer. That's not speculation.
Right.
That's reality. I hope that, that isn't going to be the case for a lot of you folks, and that you were able to get out in time. But only time will tell. But that's the harsh, scary reality of this, is that these chemicals cause cancer.
What about all the kids in town?
Right.
You know, all the ones that I told this when I talked to Jordan on one of my first interviews.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were riding their bikes and pushing their baby strollers around containers of those contaminated socks that they use to suck up chemicals. They were riding their bikes and getting sprayed with the water that was shooting up out of the creeks. They're still sitting in school.
Right.
They're still playing in those creeks.
Right.
You know, to me, it is so overwhelmingly unbelievable. I get so stressed just thinking, you know, it's one thing, you're a full-grown adult. If you want to go down and play in the creek, then by all means you go.
Right.
But to see not just one kid, not just two kids, the schools are full. You know, they're all walking home. They're all over at the park playing. Everybody's all hunky-dory.
Right.
And what's going to happen when they find out that it is in fact contaminated, that there are toxins there? They act like this is this was the biggest catastrophic disaster in the history of the United States, and there's people in town that act like, oh well, there was a magic fairy that cleaned it all up in how long were we evacuated the first time? 48 hours.
Right.
And everything's safe.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, again, it's easy to think about the health symptoms happening today, right now. But you know, for folks who are, you know, older, it's not as much of a concern. Think about, you know, some of these kids are 3 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old. In 10 years, they are still going to be children in many cases. These things were carcinogens. We set them on fire. Well, not we. Norfolk Southern set them on fire. Days later, residents were told it was safe to return home. It was safe to return home. Obviously, we know that is not the case now. So obviously some real concerns from Stella that are echoed by dozens of people that we've spoken with in East Palestine still. Again, we're going to go ahead and play another. We'll do just a couple more clips here, and then we'll start to wrap this up. I will read super chats at the end, so if you have a super chat you want to leave, please do so. And again, we're also going to shout out members at the end of the video, statuscoup.com/join, if you would like to become a member. Literally as low as $5 to $10 a month. That is the only way we're going to continue to be able to do this stuff. So statuscoup.com/join. Colin, we can go ahead and play. Let's play the clip from Lori when we spoke with Lori and Eric.
I had chemical bronchitis, diagnosed chemical bronchitis.
And this was before they quit doing the chemical, putting the chemical in front, because as soon as we started having these symptoms, we went and got checked. So the things on her record is chemical.
Yeah, I was diagnosed with contact dermatitis due to chemical exposure. I mean, that's what it says on my medical record.
As well as the chemical bronchitis.
Yes.
Right.
So, you know, they gave me all kinds of medication, did testing, blood work. This was, you know, right when it happened, I got the skin issues. So what's happening is I get blisters and they run their course and then they scar and it comes back. So they're saying it's systemic and they're sending me to a few specialists. They actually they're testing my genes because they think maybe, you know, I don't know which one it is, vinyl chloride. I'm not a chemist or a scientist, but
it's okay.
Something like, you know, it gets into your adipose tissue.
Okay.
Am I saying that right? So they're thinking, you know, this is like stuck inside somewhere, and that's why it's coming out. When it rains, I go outside, I get blisters. Or if I take a shower, like.
And these are things that this didn't happen to you before.
No,
this.
no.
Right.
No,
so this
never.
Is, you're now getting
I
these
had,
blisters, and you mentioned you have some photos. We'll make sure we put some up for folks
yeah,
to be able to see it as
yes,
well.
yes.
So you weren't having these issues before.
No.
Now you're getting blisters, skin issues, diagnosed with chemical bronchitis. Even the skin issues, they're diagnosing it as chemical, because of chemical exposure.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's not even to mention the mental anguish.
Oh yeah.
That I've gone through. If someone told me 3 months ago today that tomorrow your life is going to change forever, I would not have believed them. Because, tomorrow will be the 3-month anniversary of them destroying our town.
And again, in addition to all of the physical effects, the mental effects are huge. I mean, unfortunately, these folks are having to fight tooth and nail every single day, whether it be from, in the early days, it was to get dioxin testing. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. Everyone in town had an uproar over it. They eventually got their dioxin testing, which isn't looking very great at this point. The next thing was vinyl chloride, urine testing. Everyone they were running into roadblocks everywhere. Residents like Eric, who you just saw in that interview next to Lori, Eric, recorded himself going in and trying to get these done. He did an interview with Jordan right afterwards. We talked about that in that interview, which is yet to be posted. So if you're not subscribed to us already, please hit the subscribe button down below. That video will be posted soon. So the vinyl chloride tests, and then they all had to kind of make a stink about it. Fortunately, they were able to get Dr. Chai in town to help them out with that, get the prescriptions done, and now we're hearing that there will be more widely available vinyl chloride urine tests in East Palestine. It's every single thing they've had to fight tooth and nail. There are plenty of other examples that I'm not going to get into each single one of them right now because we need to start to wrap some of this up here in a bit, but it's thing after thing after thing. I want to play one more clip here, and this was with a resident named Jordan. She had been just dealing with all sorts of unfortunate health symptoms regarding this. She lives right along Sulphur Run. From what I understand, her name isn't on the lease of the property that she's renting, but she lives there. She has to stay there. She doesn't have another option. She tried to get relocation money from Norfolk Southern. They did not give her any. They offered her some sort of small amount for food. She wasn't looking for food. She was looking to get out because she was getting sick. And again, Sulphur Run was in her backyard. And when we spoke before I interviewed her, she basically said, hey, I've tried doing interviews and stuff before, and most of the time they either don't use it or they edit it and just take 15 seconds out. I can't get my voice out to people. We actually even took a couple days. It was like a week later. We hadn't posted her interview yet, and she texted me, and I was like, trust me, it's coming. We're going to post it tomorrow, just because she is so used to so many of these media outlets doing an interview with somebody and then just not posting it or taking 10 seconds of their interview when folks need to tell their stories. I know that if you had something like this happen in your town, you would want people to listen to you, right? Colin, we can go ahead and play this clip from Jordan, just the one clip from Jordan.
And then just recently, like when it rains, my basement floods with chemicals and my nose starts gushing blood. I choke on it. It's terrible.
Wow. I guess first off, so your home is fairly close to Sulphur Run from what we were talking about, right?
Sulphur Run actually runs right in my backyard.
Okay.
And every day there's people coming down through my backyard dragging toxic chemicals up, and I mean, they won't even, it is what it is, but it's stressful.
Absolutely. And you're saying you can actually see some of the chemicals kind of coming up like through the basement almost when it floods or something?
Yeah,
like
there's like suds, and there was suds in the creek that I looked at, and then there's like this rainbow color in my basement, like in the water, and I've been having to go down there myself with the sub pump and empty the water out. So, and Norfolk Southern told me that they're not going to be helping me relocate. They can do $250 a week to feed me, and that's not enough for me to even leave my home and stay somewhere else.
Right. And again, I mean, we've run into this with dozens of people at this point that, the Norfolk Southern Assistance Center, the rules will change. 1 week it'll be this, 1 week it'll be that, or not even that consistent. It'll be more so like depending on who you talk to.
I know. And my house hasn't even been tested. It's not in priority for Norfolk Southern, but I'm getting sick every single day, whether it be a cough, a bloody nose, just fatigued. I mean, it's terrible.
And still to this point, it's still affecting you in that way.
Yes, and it's just been getting like progressively worse for me.
Again, yet another just unfortunate, terrible situation from another resident. Again, Jordan is a young person as well. These health effects that she's getting now are scary. Yes, the short-term ones, but just like Stella was talking about down the line, it is going to be a lot more complicated. I want to get into just a couple super chats here. Actually, we'll play one more clip, and then we'll play some super chats. A lot of folks are going to be familiar with Moo on the channel. We spoke with her all 3 times we've been to East Palestine at this point. We'll give a little bit of an update from Moo, and then we'll wrap things up with super chats. Colin, you can play Moo clip number 1.
Actually, I got the cough back and everything. Of course, you sound, and I don't want to be gross or anything, but I got like the shits like everyone else. It's just like yellow, brownish shit, like liquid. I don't understand what it is. Right. Like I'm not even drinking the water, but it's still like it's affecting.
Yeah, still affecting you.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember Stella, Jamie's mom. Yeah, she was saying the same thing. Like it's.
Yep. Yeah, we'll actually be talking with Stella. No, you're good. We're going to be talking with Stella tomorrow. Actually, meeting with her, and we've spoken with several other people who've mentioned stomach issues as well. Yes. In addition to still, folks getting rashes, sore throats, headaches, still all of this sort of stuff. Definitely headaches.
Always tired.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there you have it, though. In general, unfortunately, the situation in East Palestine after my last trip, it's changed a bit, but. Really, it hasn't improved all that much. Folks are still being gaslit, as we saw with EPA Representative Mark Durno earlier on in several of those clips, which were wild. We also had that news story that we talked about from the Daily Mail article. We're going to keep kind of digging into some of that stuff as well. If you want us to be able to continue to stay on this story, stay on Flint, stay on Kalamazoo, all of these things, the best way to do it is to join statuscoup.com/join. Is the best way to do so for as little as $5 a month. We're going to read a couple super chats here, and we will wrap things up. First off, Fly Chopper Fly, $2. Colin with the thumbs up emoji. We're definitely happy to have Colin back. Colin was on the road for 2 full weeks, basically. First with Jordan in Kalamazoo and in Flint. And then he met me over in East Palestine, where we spent another basically almost a week in East Palestine. So Colin had a big 2-week trip and got a very well-deserved week off after that. So thank you, Fly Chopper Fly, for the $2. Next one, Cameron Batco, $4.99. Great reporting, Lewis. Thank you so much, Cameron. I appreciate the support. We want to keep doing it, so we appreciate the support that you are providing us here to be able to do so. Another $4.99 from Christina Massey Stuckey. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Thank you so much for the support, Christina. We appreciate it very much. We've got another one. Wow, I don't know how I missed that one in there. $50 from Small Town Guy. Definitely appreciate that. Hillbilly Justice. We will never get the truth. I'm not convinced that we're going to get the truth at this point either, but I can assure you that I am going to continue to try to get as many answers as we can. I know a lot of the residents in East Palestine who are watching right now and others who aren't are working their butts off to try to get some answers too. So appreciate that, Small Town Guy. Das Bosch Fleisch, $5.99. I'm surprised that Elon, quote, solution to all problems Musk didn't claim he could clean up East Palestine in a day yet. Too much Twitter chaos, I guess. Yeah, I'm sure Elon's got his plate full with all sorts of BS at Twitter. Yeah, who knows? I would hope that our government would do something in addition, but yes, crickets from Elon Musk. Not surprised there. Venetia David, $3 super sticker. Thank you, Venetia. Appreciate the support that you have given us. So thank you so much. And we also have a new member. Again, you're able to, if you want to at the last minute here, sign up, statuscoup.com/join. I want to shout out new member Diana. Thank you so much, Diana. Again, you can sign up for as little as $5 to $10 a month to make sure that we're able to continue this reporting both on the ground and from afar, reporting in East Palestine, in Flint, in Kalamazoo. Jordan will be back tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. I believe he's got a guest coming from Kalamazoo on the show. You definitely won't want to miss that. If you're not subscribed to us on YouTube already, please hit the subscribe button down below. You can also follow me on Twitter at LewisD217. I'll tweet about all sorts of things related to East Palestine and otherwise. Thank you all so much for watching. Really appreciate the support. We're now, 55 members is now 56 members. And actually, you know what, Colin? Do we have a date for the members call yet? Has that been decided or anything like that? Or do
Right, we have a poll going for it. So if you go to our YouTube channel under the community, you can see the recent post for the poll and vote for it. I think last I checked, Friday at 7 p.m. was winning, but we'll close the poll probably sometime tomorrow morning and have a set date of what everyone preferred tomorrow morning.
So if you're a member, get in there, vote in that poll, and that's another perk of membership. You not only support us being able to continue to go out and tell these stories, however, you also get to join in on a monthly members call where we all get together in a Zoom call. We kind of give an update as to everything going on with Status Coup. You're able to ask questions. It's a good time. I enjoyed the last one that we did, so looking forward to this one. So keep an eye out for that post. It's in the community tab right now, and you can vote on that. Alrighty, I won't keep you any longer. Thank you all so much for watching. We really appreciate it, and have a good night.